Chairman. And Ambassador, thank you for being before us today. There's so many things to talk about. First, I appreciated the President's tweet about an hour ago where he talked about meeting with President Xi and the G20. And it seems to me he tasked you and your people to do some groundwork prior to that meeting that perhaps can result in getting the 301 negotiations back on track, which I think is very important. But USMCA is going to be my focus today because it's so crucial that we get this thing moving. And you've done a good job negotiating an agreement. It makes some necessary updates to the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. By the way, the thing is 25 years old. In the last quarter century, a lot has changed in our economy. A lot has changed in terms of our trading relationships. And I think for the most part, the agreement that you negotiated reflects that. And so, although I don't agree with every aspect of it, nor do you, because you had to negotiate it, it's a good agreement. On balance, it's going to be great for the people I represent in Ohio. Mexico's our #2 trading partner. Canada's #1. And so we very much want to have this agreement. The status quo is NAFTA. I mean, the alternative is, do we move forward with something that is better and improved, or do we stick with the status quo? The International Trade Commission has now said it'll create 176,000 jobs. It'll grow our economy. By the way, someone said, well, it's only going to grow the economy about 1/3 of a point. That's substantial, particularly in a state like mine, where these two countries are huge trading partners. And by the way, it's more than the projected GDP growth from the much-touted TPP agreement, as an example. So this is a big deal. And I think it's a high-quality 21st century agreement you brought home. Again, there's some things that you or I might have done a little differently, but that's not our choice. Our choice here is the status quo, which is NAFTA, or this new USMCA. Let me ask you a couple questions, if I might. A yes or no answer would suffice. Are labor and environmental commitments enforceable under the status quo, under NAFTA?
They are not.
Not, okay. Are they enforceable under the new USMCA?
They are enforceable.
They are enforceable. Okay, that's a big difference. How would you describe these new environmental and labor standards?
The environmental and labor standards are essentially non-existent in the current NAFTA, and they are quite robust, the most robust we've ever had in USMCA.
Most ever, any trade agreement we've ever done.
That's correct.
Let me ask you another question. Under the status quo, does the NAFTA contain any provisions related to digital trade or the internet?
No, there are no digital trade provisions in NAFTA.
None. None. Even though that's a big part of our trade today, does the USMCA, the new agreement, contain provisions related to digital trade and the internet?
It does, Senator. It has absolutely the gold standard. The best. I don't think there's anyone that could point to an agreement that's better than this with respect to digital trade.
Okay. How about expansion of agricultural products? Senator Cardin talked earlier about the opportunities for exporting more poultry. And I'm all for chickens. We also export them from Ohio. But how about beef, and how about pork, and how about commodities, wheat and corn, soybeans? Is it better for American farmers under the status quo NAFTA, or better under the USMCA, the new agreement?
No, the USMCA is substantially better. There are egg and poultry improvements. There are dairy improvements. There are wheat improvements. There are SPS improvements. There are a whole bunch of additional improvements.
Let's talk about auto jobs for a second. You come from Ohio originally. Auto jobs are really important to us, and #2 state in the country on auto and supplier and OEM jobs. In the past 25 years, under the status quo, have we lost or gained auto jobs to Mexico?
We've lost a substantial amount of our auto industry to Mexico.
Will the new USMCA lead to more automotive production and therefore more auto jobs in the United States of America?
Senator, it's our calculation that this agreement will lead to $33 billion in new investment over 5 years, $32 billion worth of annual parts and purchases in the United States, and over 80,000 new jobs just in the auto and auto parts sector.
Over 80,000 new jobs just in the auto sector. Okay, so our choice is the new USMCA, which may not be perfect for everybody, and sometimes around here we make the perfect the enemy of the good, and the status quo. The status quo is the current NAFTA. So, look, I hope you'll continue to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on this. But I could go on and on, from the steel content and labor content in autos, the chapters on intellectual property you talked about, cracking down on state-owned enterprises, currency manipulation, something a lot of us have pushed you on, frankly, and Democrats have been more front and center on that, working with me on that over the years, and I appreciate that. But that's also unprecedented, right, in a trade agreement?
That's correct.
So there are a lot of things in here that, if you compare the status quo, which is NAFTA, to the USMCA, there are huge improvements. So I hope you continue to work with my colleagues who are undecided, because I think a lot of them are truly undecided. They're sincere about trying to get there and make this point that this is a choice we have to make here as a country. Do we want to move forward, or do we want to continue with the status quo that's not going to work for us? 25 years is a long time. Thank you.